What can Braun do for you? A saying many KU fans are quite familiar with, but this time it's not Christian Braun we're talking about. It's the older brother, Parker Braun, and newest KU commit to the roster. We discuss all that and the rest of the scholarship positions next. Hey guys, welcome into another episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast. I, of course, am your host, Keegan Russell, and with me again is Spencer and JB. Fellas, how we doing today?
Doing great. Good Saturday morning.
Good Saturday morning. So a week ago was not a great Saturday morning. A week ago when we recorded, it was before the Mgbako news came out. But at that time, Ernest Uday had transferred out, leaving us all pretty sad about the depth. And then the very next day, we were hoping Mgbako would be the transfer everyone was waiting for. And unfortunately, he decided to go to Indiana. So we head into the weekend with bad news. And we're going to get into the good news of what came after that. But let's just kind of start there first. Obviously, we've talked Uday. But how surprised were you guys that Mgbako ended up choosing Indiana over Kansas?
That was a big shock. That was something that didn't feel quite right, just because I think we as Kansas fans hyped up all the chances of how far we can go if we get him, and we knew that it would be a scenario where he gets plenty of playing time, and he could be that missing piece that we really need, just to round out this roster in full. Well, I guess with as long as we have some backup centers, and of course we did end up getting Parker Braun, but Mgbako still would be the ideal piece to finish out the roster today. So it's just it was a big shock. I think the playing time and the minutes that he would get, I guess, would be more at Indiana, and maybe that was appealing to him. He wanted to be in the spotlight, and he would have been behind Hunter, and he would have been behind maybe KJ and Dewan in terms of running this team. But it was still big letdown. Another reason it felt like a surprise, though, was because I think I've said this before. It just seems like in college basketball, nothing is ever a coincidence. And the transfers leave, Uday leaves, and it's like, okay, that's for sure. We're getting Mgbako. It's happening. He left because Bill told him that Mgbako reached out and said he's going to commit, but that none of that happened. So it just didn't make any sense. It was a big shock, big letdown. On to the next one, though. So we'll see where we can go and how we can recover.
Spencer, do you think he ultimately chose Indiana because of NIL? Because the rumor was, Mark Cuban came in at the last minute, former Indiana grad, and of course is connected to a big NIL group. And
right.
Next thing you know, all day he's coming to KU, and then boom, Indiana.
Yeah, I would tell the alumni association to step it up. We need more billionaires so we can land more of these guys. But I think
hey, KU sends you a letter in the mail every single week asking for support. So why don't you help out?
That's right. I should have Venmo'd Mgbako $20 maybe when it came through. No, I was a little surprised, but at the same time, you just saw two highly recruited returning freshman players transfer. So if I'm Mgbako, it's like, okay, what did they not like about their experience there? Because he's going to be in the same boat. He's a front court guy, highly recruited out of high school, and he saw these guys that honestly he probably kind of put himself in their shoes and was like, I'm going to get the same situation here, and so could have gone to Indiana for more of a guaranteed minutes, guaranteed playing time, be a focal point of the offense, because Bill probably has the offensive play style locked in like right now. And so, I think we got to be very aware of that. We're not going to get every single transfer. We're not going to get every single recruit. We just got Hunter Dickinson. So, I was surprised and I was definitely disappointed, but now we've had a couple of days to really think about it. I understand why.
Yeah, landing Hunter was still the big prize, so I don't think we can complain too much. But after that bad news, then heads turned last week into what comes next. Obviously, KU still needed to fill the backup big spot. and there really wasn't a whole lot out there. I know JB, you and I talked in last episode about a couple guys, and we mentioned a few names, Grant Nelson, Connor Vanover, Aziz Banduego, which I know I'm botching his name, Arthur Kaluma, maybe some guys that are in the draft process. And those are all still some potential names that could be, because KU still has 2 scholarships left. But we did kind of touch on the possibility of getting the older Braun brother in Parker Braun, the transfer from Missouri to Santa Clara, now to Kansas. So we do land the backup big. And I think from a fan's perspective, we're going to have a lot of excitement and fun with this because, his younger brother is Christian Braun, and everyone knows the history there and the excitement the fans have. But Parker Braun transfers into Kansas. He's a graduate, so he is eligible immediately. We're going to talk here for a few minutes about, what the ceiling is for him, what the floor is for him, what to kind of expect, who does he need to fulfill the kind of role to be that backup 5. But listed at about 6'9", 6'10". He's a little skinnier frame for a big man, about 210 to 215. So a little bit on the skinnier side. Plays more like a traditional big though. He can step out. He took 57 threes last year. Didn't shoot great from 3, but he has the ability to shoot if need be, to stretch it a little bit. But he slides in now as that backup 5 man on scholarship. There was some talk that he could be a walk-on, but after recruitment ended and we didn't get anybody else, that he could transfer in as a walk-on, being a local product, in-state tuition, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately gets one of the 3 scholarship spots and now slides in as your backup big. Before we get into his fit, I just want to run through some of the statistics for you guys on him. So let me pull up his stuff again real quick. So last year at Santa Clara, he averaged 7.7 points a game, 5.8 rebounds, 2 assists, on shooting 55% from the floor. So fairly efficient from the floor. He averaged close to 29 minutes a game, 29 to 30. So he was in fact the starter. So when he transferred from Mizzou to Santa Clara, he was the starting big man for the last 2 seasons. And he's not a guy that's going to stuff the stat sheets necessarily. You're not asking him to be your primary scorer or anything like that. But he was very efficient for Santa Clara, especially pick and roll, pick and pop, paint touches, paint defense. There's a whole lot of super nerdy metrics we could get into that we probably won't today. But on paper, he's pretty efficient. I think he can do a lot of things. He ranked, I think, in like the 93rd percentile in pick and roll offense or something like that. So he is pretty efficient. So just first thoughts from you guys, one on him transferring in and what that does as far as moving the needle for that backup spot. Are you guys content with him being the backup? Is it still something we need to look after? But just kind of initial thoughts on that first.
Yeah, I was content with it. I think, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but the narrative between Ernest Udeh leaving and Parker Braun committing, the narrative amongst KU Twitter was, Ernest, you got to come back, because, or I should clarify, it was between Ernest transferring out, us not getting Mgbako, and then everybody flocked to KU Twitter saying, Ernest, it didn't happen. He didn't come. Like, come back. You can get get those minutes you're looking for. And I think that narrative still exists to a certain degree. I mean, I would definitely take him to come back, but then, Parker Braun comes in, and it was, KU Twitter was kind of split. Half of KU Twitter was like, oh, this is awful. We need a 5-star guy. Like, this, who, I get it's Christian's older brother, but what are we doing recruiting him when we could be going after this guy and that guy? And then the other half of KU Twitter was a little bit more like me and was thinking, this isn't half bad. I don't mind taking another Braun onto the roster. He's Christian Braun's older brother, and when we had Christian Braun, we won a title. I'm not saying that's going to happen. It very well could, but it's just like, hey, let's get another national title in the Braun family, right? But also, you look at what he's done for Missouri, you look at what he's done for Santa Clara, and he has all the tools. You just went over them. He has all the tools to be exactly what we need. He is a guy that is going to be understanding his role from day one. He's going to come into the system. He's going to play the backup 5 role. He's not going to play 29 minutes a game. He's probably going to play closer to 15, maybe. It just depends on how everything really shapes up. We can't really make all those judgment calls quite yet, but he knows his role. It's the problem with recruiting sometimes is everybody wants to be a starter. Everybody wants those roles that are super significant, but his can be significant in his own way. So I'm looking at it as a very big positive. I'm looking at his stats. He can do the work that's needed off the bench, and that's really all we can ask for.
Yeah, I'm just excited. We get more Twitter support from Mama Brown again.
Yeah.
So this is good. She's
Shout
great
out
on
Lisa
Twitter,
Brown.
so. No, I was excited. I mean, we get a guy that was a 2-year starter in a Division I program coming off our bench, and being efficient in pick and roll, being a rim runner, being a guy that can at least draw a defender out and not clog up the lane. And keep in mind, he's going to be playing behind Hunter Dickinson, so he's going to have some tutelage there to sharpen up offensive game. And Bill Self is just really good with big guys in general. So I think we're very fortunate to get a guy like that who is going to fill a role like a backup center. I mean, we're getting a guy that, again, he started for 2 years, so he knows the grinds of his season. He knows, different offensive schemes. I mean, he's going to adapt really quickly. And I think worst case scenario, he's going to be a guy that can come and be an energy guy, get offensive boards, all that stuff. And best case scenario, I mean, again, if he can get us an efficient 6 to 8 points, grab some boards, a game, protect the rim when he's down there, I think that's great. And we also have a great strength and conditioning program, so he can fill out his frame a little bit too. I mean, I think it's really one of the best case scenarios we could have gotten.
Yeah, I do think what you just said there, maybe by the time the season starts, he may have already added 10, 12 pounds of muscle mass already. Now, again, not that he's, super lean and skinny, but he's not your prototypical frame for a big. But yeah, I think it's exciting for fans. He's going to be a guy that when you look at who was left on the market, there weren't many guys that were almost a picture perfect fit for the type of role player KU needs in that backup 5 spot. Because again, with Hunter Dickinson, you're getting the guy. You have that Udoka type production of he's going to get the majority of the minutes and everything's going to run through him. So when McCormick comes in or Mitch Lightfoot comes in, you're just trying to have them get a few minutes to spare him some rest and come back in and do all that. So I think it's a great fit for Parker Braun here. Obviously the first player comparison I think fans are looking at is, can he fill that Mitch Lightfoot role? Can he give you spot minutes here and there? Mitch had that nice little baby hook, kind of small little baby turnaround jumper, good around, wasn't the best defender, but could hold his ground, stay in his zone, and could get a few blocks here and there. Can Parker Braun replicate some of that in his 8 to 10 minutes a game? And can he also, when needed, if foul trouble happens with Hunter or an injury or something like that, can he play more of that 20, 25 minutes a night and still give you something as far as solid production? Obviously, the game plan would shift to somebody else to score more, but can he fulfill that role efficiently? And I think he's a great fit for that. I think that's what fans expect. Maybe the floor is someone more like a Dwight Colby or a Hunter Nicholson. Got it right that time. Maybe his production's not quite there, but again, I think his skill set fits pretty well with what we need out of that backup 5 spot. So just, Spencer, let me start with you on this. What is your expectations for Parker this upcoming season with what we know about him now?
Yeah, I mean, expectations should just be, kind of exactly what you said. Just come off the bench and Bill's going to expect him to do a lot of the dirty work here. So he's going to expect him to crash offensive boards. He's going to expect him to take charges if he's switching over on pick and roll or something like that. So I think, KU fans should expect this guy to do especially the little things that are going to help us when we're on when we're on the wrong end of an 8-0 run, and when we're, trying to, when we're getting out rebounded, the first couple of minutes with our starters. So I don't think anyone should be expecting a double machine, but if he just comes in and gets boards and at the very least offensively runs to the rim, is good in pick and rolls. I think that's all we can expect. And I think that's all we'll need out of him in terms of offense.
Yeah, if he can kind of play the way Uday did at the end of last season, coming in for those 8 to 10 minutes, pick and roll,
Right.
rim runner, get a few paint touches here and there, play a little bit better defense. I think Uday was coming into that, but I think Parker Braun's gonna be tremendous in that backup spot, and could be a guy like Mitch Lightfoot who, wins us a few games here and there if needed. So JB, let me ask you a different question then. Knowing Parker's on the roster now as that backup 5, from a bigger picture perspective, obviously we still have a couple scholarships left. Still don't have a lot of big man depth, but we don't need necessarily as much. Where does this leave you feeling confidence wise with, are you good going into the year with Parker as the main backup, or should we hope that KU still brings in another body, whether it's a walk-on or another scholarship player that could compete with Parker for the backup spot?
Yeah, it's a tremendous question, and that's what everyone is really thinking. Can we be content with having Parker as our only backup 5? I think we can, mainly because we don't need him to do a whole lot. And we've kind of touched on that already, but I want to point something out. I pulled up the stats from the team last year, and I would like to point out we had a pretty good team last year. I think we would all agree it was a great team. Now, in terms of like minutes and in terms of points per game and what we can expect, we don't have to have too high of an expectation. If I go and I'm looking at points per game, Jalen and Grady, of course, carried the load, 20 and 14 points respectively. Kevin McCullough had 10.7, KJ 10.6, DeJuan 8.9. DeJuan can absolutely have that 8.9 or maybe even increase it next year. Kevin McCullough and Jalen Wilson and Grady Dick, their numbers are going to be replaced by our other starters, especially by Hunter. But you look at the next one up, it's Joseph Yesufu with 4.1 points per game. Ernest Uday, 2.6 points per game. Of course, there's a story behind both of those numbers, but what we have to remind ourselves of is if we have a guy coming in like Parker Braun, now I know that he had 20 plus minutes a game and was averaging 7 a game, but if he can average 7, that's way better than last year. We have a solid guy with experience, and what does Bill Self want? He wants a guy that can rebound and defend and that has experience, and Parker checks all those boxes. So I'm not so worried. The ideal scenario, I think, is that we get some more guys just for that insurance policy. We could, if we took on Grant Nelson, I think he could absolutely compete for starting minutes. He might even start KJ at the 3. And you could maybe play Grant Nelson next to Hunter Dickinson because they both can kind of go out and shoot it from 3. So it's there's definitely still a need. I think if we get another guy like Grant Nelson, or if we got another solid wing, we would be in good shape. If we got nobody, I think we'd be okay too. So we just kind of have to remain with some positivity.
Yeah, I think you summed it up pretty well right there. I don't think there's a lot to worry about. Worst case scenario is Hunter gets hurt, Parker's your main big, KJ's your backup, or KJ's now your new 5 again, Parker's your backup. Even in that role, I think the mindset is, well, the season could still be salvaged, but it's probably not the same looking season without Hunter. So, all things the same, and of course, don't wish any ill luck upon Hunter.
Right.
Again, that backup 5 spot's going to be used seldom here and there for relief, and you're not asking him to do a whole lot. So I'm pretty confident with him being the backup. I wouldn't be shocked though if KU does go find another big, whether it's a walk-on addition that's just another camp body, someone that has some promise, like when we brought in James Szynski a couple of years ago from the football team. Maybe not that type of route, but someone like that who's just another big body to put in there. Because right now, I think the only other guy on the roster that would do that kind of role would be Dylan Wilhite as a walk-on. And I don't want to speak into this because I don't know the process, but walk-on spots aren't guaranteed to roll over every single year from what I've heard. So even though he's still listed on the roster, it doesn't necessarily mean he will be a walk-on on the team. But I wouldn't be shocked if that is something that they do, because they do still have 2 scholarship spots left. Don't have to use them. I think we've said before on another episode that whether they got Mgbako or a backup big, they could just stay put with where they're at and check off the box on some of those IARP lists for cutting out scholarships. I think really though, instead of another 5-man, they're probably going to look to fill one of those 2 scholarship spots with a stretch 4, a guy that could play the 5 spot if needed, a little bit bigger than KJ, maybe someone that's 6'8", 6'9", 220, 230 pound, more of a prototypical stretch 4. Again, don't have to have it, but I think that's something that Bill Self's probably looking for. And obviously, JB, you touched on some of the guys we talked about earlier. And Grant Nelson's probably the big X factor. Combine is going on right now for the NBA, and he's actually done fairly well.
He's got good measurements.
Yes, the prediction is he still comes back for another year of college to kind of showcase some more, because he hasn't been on this stage to the public yet. I've listened to several podcasts and done some of my own research on how he would fit alongside Hunter, and I think he'd be fantastic. He, even though he's listed at anywhere, I've seen him listed anywhere from 6'10" to 7 foot. He's got a lot of guard skills, so he is capable of stretching the floor, being active with his feet, and shuffling around, moving around. So I think Bill Self would be able to figure that part out if he did. That would be dream scenario, and at that point, again, KJ's probably still starting, because how do you not start KJ when he has that much trust from Bill? It'd be a very different looking team. Wouldn't be as 3-point dominant, which is fine. Timberlake on the outside, it would still be probably your best threat there. But that'd be huge. Arthur Kaluma would still be a good fit too at this point. Little bit. I mean, him and KJ are pretty similar, but Kaluma's got a little bit more paint presence ability than KJ does, so he could still kind of spare you a few minutes here and there. I don't think Kaluma's coming back. He's actually fared pretty well at the draft. And of course, you got the decision of Kevin McCullough still waiting. It sounds like right now that he's still all in on the draft process or playing overseas. So I wouldn't expect him at all to come back, like we said in other episodes. Obviously, KU would take him if he did decide to come back, because he's one of the best perimeter defenders, and then KU would have one of the best defensive teams in the country. But all that being said, 2 scholarship spots left. I'm still on the side of, if we don't land anybody, I'm fine, because you still have these 4 freshmen that have to get playing time to know what they're capable of. And I think, Spencer, you mentioned this, 10, 15 minutes ago with Mgbako. Well, maybe part of Mbako's decision not to come here was because he looks at last year's roster and goes, you guys had talented freshmen and they did nothing. So what does that say about me? I know I'm more talented than them, a higher ranked recruit. But if they couldn't figure out between the 4 of them how to get playing time in that system, there's no guarantee for me. So I'd rather go to a situation where the fit with the roster might make a little bit more sense in that coaching style. So I'm content with what we have. I think guys like Marcus Adams and Elmarco Jackson need some opportunity to showcase what they're capable of. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same position a year from now, going, hey, we had 4 highly recruited incoming freshmen, 3 of them transferred out, and we'll never know what they could do because they never got playing time. So again, I'm content with where we are here. Moving forward, the draft process is still underway. There's a couple weeks left or a week or 2 left until some of those decisions have to be made. But as we're kind of wrapping up here, I did want to touch a few minutes on some of the other transfers that we have some update on. Kyle Cuff has now transferred to Syracuse, which is an almost perfect fit for him. He is a New York guy himself. I think his athleticism fits great into a Syracuse system. Even though Jim Boeheim's not the coach anymore, I doubt that they're going to just completely change their play style. I think he's going to be a great fit there. And then Zuby, of course, goes to St. John's. He was one that they were looking at him and Uday. But Zuby goes in there and gets to compete for playing time right away. So I think that's exciting for him. Uday is kind of the X factor. It's still out there. He's the highest ranked big man on the board. Unfortunately, for KU fans, he's taking visits to Kentucky, Duke, even K-State. He's probably one of the more prized possessions on the market right now, and hopefully he doesn't pick any of those three. Of those three, we were talking about this offline earlier, but of those three, K-State makes the most sense as far as playing time is concerned. I think if he goes to Duke or Kentucky, he's in the same spot he was at Kansas. He's not competing for the starting spot, and if Kentucky gets Sheboy back, then he's really not playing. Duke, they lost recruits because of the fact that there's no playing time available. So he's probably going to end up somewhere else. I doubt it would be K-State. It just doesn't feel like something that could happen. But if it did, I think he'd actually be a good fit for him.
Don't
And
say
then
that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm looking at it from a basketball perspective for
Yeah,
him,
yeah.
not as a KU fan. Then the last thing KU does, they are linked to another player right now in the portal, and that is Zion Poland. He is a transfer guard, upperclassman. Pretty solid year last year, averaged 18.3 points a game at UC Riverside, 4 assists a game, 4 rebounds, under 50% shooting. I don't think he's a need for us anymore with Arterio Morris, Marco Jackson, but he's been one that's linked. And then, of course, the biggest name that's out there, which was probably a surprise to everybody, was the fact that Caleb Love entered back into the portal. The former North Carolina guard who transferred to Michigan and supposedly either isn't smart enough or his credits weren't going to be high quality enough for Michigan. No one really knows the true story on that yet. But his name's back on the market. And so, of course, KU has been linked to him. We went over this in another podcast episode before. It's not likely he comes to Kansas. He is inefficient. Could he play better in a Bill Self system? Sure. But I don't think he is a strong need right now. And I'm sure people will disagree with me on that because he is a good scorer and can shoot. But I don't want someone taking 8 threes a game and hitting 2 of them. I'd rather someone take 4 threes a game and make 3 of them. And again, with this
We're not
roster
getting,
construction,
yeah,
we don't need
we're
him.
not getting Caleb Love. I hope everyone understands there's absolutely no shot. He sees the way Bill Self coaches. You think a volume scorer who is predicated on taking a lot of shots a game is going to come to a Bill Self offense? I don't think so.
Well, he'd be
The-
the guy that's in the doghouse.
Yeah.
He would have a similar storyline to Remy Martin in the sense of, if you're not going to go do what I need out there, you're sitting on the bench. Maybe he figures it out later in the season, but I think it would be a waste for Caleb Love to do
I agree.
that. So as we wrap up here, I have had a couple questions and I've noticed some comments and other ones. People want to know a little bit more about how the rotation is going to look, and that is something I want to get into. I don't want to touch that yet until we know how the final roster stands, because I could give you a roster prediction right now and say, well, Marcus Adams is the backup forward. He's going to get 12 minutes a night. Well, then tomorrow KU lands somebody else and that rotation is worthless. So we're going to wait to do any rotational stuff until we see the final roster put together here, and that probably won't be for another month or so. But K fans, there's still plenty of names out there to look at. Obviously, the ones we mentioned from the draft process are probably the main focal points now. Maybe another bigger sized wing that's in the portal that's not in the draft process could come in and be a fit somewhere. But as it stands right now, it's going to be a pretty athletic team from the backcourt perspective. It's just kind of filling out that 3, 4, 5 spot. So stay tuned for all that. I don't know when we'll jump on next. It's kind of going to be maybe we'll see. We'll talk a little bit about, maybe how about this? Let's do next episode. Let's talk about Grady, Jalen, and Kevin as far as their draft combine, and then see if part of that conversation we have any more insight on Kevin's decision. And then maybe by the time that episode rolls out, we'll have a little bit more clarity on the guys that are stepping out of the draft process and could be back on the market. So, guys, any final thoughts?
The Lakers.
Lakers.
Repping his Lakers, who are down 2-0, and hopefully by the time you guys check this out, they're down 3-0. We'll see. But yeah, Spencer, we do need to talk some NBA.
The only silver lining if the Nuggets win is Christian Braun, of course.
Winning again.
But yeah,
how
winning
cool would
again.
that be? Win the national championship and then win the NBA playoffs the very next year.
That's insane.
That'd be great.
He would be relentless. He would be just in everyone's face saying, "I'm the best," and saying another particular word as well.
A certain word, catchphrase of
yeah.
his.
Quick shout out to Christian for guarding Kevin Durant, LeBron, guarding these like top level guys and doing a great job. So he's killing it. He's not scoring 20 points a game, but he is playing some really good defense.
I think he's playing his way into a starting spot next year. Again, maybe we'll get into this another episode more too, but Denver has a lot of money tied up into their starting five, and maybe he could replace a guy like Caldwell Pope next year and be that starting two guard in the backcourt, because he provides a similar stuff to what Pope does. Just Pope makes $15 million a year more. But yeah, we'll get into that in another episode. But for now, guys, thank you. Again, you can always find our podcast on Spotify. You can find us over on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Hit us up on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at KCSA Pod. You'll see that on the screen right now. Shout us out. Let us know how you're feeling about Parker Braun. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of memes coming down the road of Brown's name connected to some of the previous memes we saw with Christian Braun. Let us know what you feel, what you're thinking, what his fit's going to be like, if there's a player comparison you have for him, or just the overall excitement level that you have for Braun coming in. With that, guys, thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to having you guys on the next episode. Rock Chalk.
Rock Chalk.
Rock Chalk.